Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Melania Luisa Marte to talk about her debut poetry collection, Plantains and Our Becoming. Plantains and Our Becoming is an amazing collection about identity, culture, home, and belonging. Now, in this episode, Melania and I talk about her new collection. We learn more about her writing and reading life. She talks about why poetry is important and how readers who are intimidated by the art form can approach it. Plus, we get some great book recommendations. But before we get into the episode, please take a quick second and leave the podcast a 5-star rating and review, because it's a great way to show your support. It opens up new opportunities for the show, helps us find new listeners, and it keeps me and the podcast going. So, thanks in advance, and now on to the episode with author Melania Luisa Marte. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is a writer, poet, and musician, but she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, an amazing collection of poetry entitled Plantains and Our Becoming. Please welcome to the couch, Melania Luisa Marte. Hi, Melania.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Victoria. So excited to chat.
I am so excited to chat. I mean, first off, when I got this book in the mail, I was just so excited. Not only is the cover beautiful, so shout out cover designer, but I finished this one in one sitting. You guys, it's just so
wow.
good. I did. But before we get into it, I want to know how you're feeling, because this is your debut. This is your debut, Melania. It's available. Readers can legit get their hands on a copy right now. How are you feeling? How excited are you?
I am so excited. I'm just like counting down the days until the release so that everyone can get their hands on it and just devour it as you did in one sitting, hopefully, and just feel all the things. I want people to feel all the things. I was very intentional with this collection to give folks quite the journey through the Caribbean, through the American lens, the first generation American, the immigration story of my parents. I mean, it was very intimate poems about my identity, my upbringing. You're also getting super personal poems about the island that my parents grew up in, the Dominican Republic. And then you're also seeing this story of the plantains just kind of unravel on the island that the Dominican Republic and Haiti share. And then in part 3, we're being led to joy, we're being led to grounding ourselves, to restore ourselves, to seek reparations, to seek leisure, to seek rest, and to love it all throughout the process and to ground ourselves in our truth. So I'm super excited for folks to maybe cry about it, laugh about it, dance about it. There's so many elements in this collection that for me have brought me so much strength and so much love and so much happiness. So I'm super excited just to, have readers just digest it and we can talk about it,
Absolutely. I think this is a book folks will want to have a conversation around. You're not going to want to just read it by yourself and just, sit with it. I really think this is something people will want to share with each other, talk to each other about. It's incredibly beautiful. I think it will serve both as a mirror for some. In my case, I saw so many similarities with my family, my life, my upbringing, as well as it will be a window for folks who don't really have these intimate relationships with people who have similar backgrounds. So I think it's just incredibly powerful. Now, if I'm being honest, the first one I read was actually, because I looked at the table of contents first, was Smuggling a Mango is Hard, because I have been there. Straight up, I have been there. Now, fair game. I've never tried bringing it to the US, but I have to the UK many a time, and I would much rather hold on to my mango than my white rum. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and that's like a crime. Like you could actually get in serious trouble for trying to smuggle like fruits and things into the country. It's so strange. It's so strange. And for me, that poem I had this was actually one of the first poems I wrote from this collection, and I had written it before I even thought that this would become a collection. I had just written it as a rant because this actually happened to me, and I was so upset, and I just was like, let me, for me, whenever I'm angry or like sad or whatever, I'm like, it's like in Mean Girls where they're like, put it into the burn book. So I have my own burn book and I just like rant into my book and I just like, I'm using my pen and I'm like going off and I'm like writing all these things just to like, release it because it's like holding in microaggressions. There's something really taxing on the body about that. So I always try to release it, either having a conversation with a friend or a family member or just writing it down and letting it go. And so it turned into a really interesting poem, right? Because it's like, for me, mangoes are super, super, it's a profound thing for me, like eating a mango, especially eating a mango from my grandmother's backyard. It's a ritual for me. It's super grounding. And so I was so excited to see if I could sneak these mangoes in. And when they got confiscated, I was devastated. And also the fact that this guy was being such a creep just made things so much worse. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, you're making it into a poem, all right.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So there are two more from this part one that, again, I could talk about each and every one in great detail, but I'm just going to say two. On Cardi B, because I felt like, okay, yes, I felt every word of that. I loved it. But then also on colorism, because, see, colorism always felt like something to me that we kept within the house, but it's important to have a conversation outside of the house, outside of our communities. So tell me about briefly on Cardi B.
Yeah. So, on the subject of Cardi B, I had actually written what's in the poem for a slam poem with a beloved friend of mine. May he rest in peace. His name is Rage Almighty, and he was this super amazing poet. And we were on a slam team together for Dallas Poetry Slam. And I had written something that I wanted to, because I wanted a poem about Cardi B, because I thought at the time, this was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, um, like 3 or 4 years ago, I can't remember. But I I had seen the impact that Cardi B's emergence and success and iconic entrance into hip hop had for the culture. And I really wanted to talk about how her identity um, paved the way for a lot of Afro Latina women, who just didn't feel like they hadn't really seen representation. They hadn't really seen, that many Afro Latinas really given entry into the media world, into the fashion world, into reality TV and all of that. And so Cardi B's career was, and her expression, her just not buying into respectability politics, her just being boldly herself. Sometimes it's not like she's perfect. Obviously, there are things that you're like, okay, maybe she does need therapy, maybe she needs anger management, maybe she needs these things. But all in all, um, she is a very a figure that has made an impact and has given women confidence to be their authentic selves. And so this is why I say in the poem, like, she is this stripper royalty turned feminist hood rap icon. And maybe that some feminists are like, I wouldn't consider her a feminist icon. But to me, in terms of black feminism, black womanism, to me, she is a conversation, to be had about the ways in which, sex workers and strippers and women who live, on the outskirts of what is considered, respectable women and who are treated in very, very saddening ways, very disrespectful ways, very dehumanizing ways, for them to take power and ownership of their bodies and their lives and say, I'm going to thrive even if the odds are against me. I'm going to thrive even if you believe I don't deserve to live, I don't deserve love, I don't deserve respect, I don't deserve protection. And so I know so many of those women, and those are women that are in my life, and I want to honor that. And so much of my work is to allow folks to really see our full humanity. And so I really cherish this poem because I think it brings this conversation on how do we cancel respectability politics, right? How do we allow women to be their most authentic selves and thrive? And to understand that, yes, um, all of these things can exist at once, and they can also still be flawed human beings who are still growing into themselves and who are still becoming and who are, just doing their best and doing the best they can with the circumstances that they have been in.
Absolutely. I really appreciated this poem, but just because, like you said, I think sometimes when we think about feminism, it rarely includes people of color. And
Mm-hmm.
in a way, I do see Cardi B as a feminist icon. So I really appreciated this as well. The second part of your book really delves into a bit of the history of the island of Hispaniola. In particular, I loved the fact that you had a section called The Haitian and Dominican Flag Exchange Words, Internalized and Anti-Blank. And I lived because the blank part, I remember just like, oh my gosh, yes. And of course, the list that continued. And tracing back your history so that ancestry.com doesn't take your money. It was just kind of really powerful, but also some parts of it were a bit sad for me because most of us don't have a history to trace, especially when you're from an island. In my case, most of the folks I know in the Caribbean, we can't trace beyond the family members that we knew and then the family members who are alive, the ones they knew. And that's kind of where it ends. And that was a bit sad as well. But I loved your depiction of a family tree. That was brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is. I mean, I get emotional just thinking about that. The fact that, you know, in the midst of your survival, when you try to trace your way back, there's only so far back you can go because of the impacts of colonialism, right? Because of the impacts of terror on your people. You are only able to go so back. It's interesting. I was at the gym today and my trainer was like, she's always throwing out these quirky, random questions for us while we're like suffocating on the treadmill. And she was like, she said to us, if you could go back to a different decade in the past, what decade would you go back to revisit? And me and the guy next to me, who happens to be black, we look at each other, we just cackle, we just bust out laughing, and we're like, well, for black folks, this is really complicated because, like, do we really want to go back to the past? In what past are we feeling good about ourselves? Are we safe? And so we both said to her, we were like, we want to go into the future. And I was like, I want to go 100 years into the future when we figured out what's going to happen with climate change and we've solved some of these issues and there's no plastic in the ocean. That's where I want to go. Okay. So let's go to that future in 100 years, maybe. But like, I think about that because it's like, yeah, like in the midst of me asking these questions of like, okay, I'm this disheveled palm tree. I've been uprooted. How do I become? And then how do I try to regain some of what's been stolen from me, right? What's been taken from me? How do I regain that if it's gone, right? And so it really, for me, journeying through the plantains was also journeying through my ancestry because when I had found out that the plantains traveled on the same boats as our ancestors. And to me, I mean, that had me weeping. And I thought that was so profound that just as our ancestors were on these boats, so were these plantains. And so these plantains know things. And so I was like, let me look into what's been left, right? Because these plantains have survived and we have survived along with them and they have nourished us and helped us survive. And so I wanted for folks to really understand that in our food, in our music, in the way we interact with nature, there are blood memories. And so when we allow ourselves to sit just the way our ancestors did and eat plátanos and eat a mango and take in a nice hearty stew and a sancocho or gumbo, like all of these things, when we allow ourselves to take in all of that DNA and all of that livelihood, we are being given the gift of memory through taste, through the senses, right? Through our sight, through our smell, through the goosebumps we get on our skin, through the way a beat, right? An African beat just moves you to dance, to want to get up off your feet. This is the blood memories that we can use to honor our ancestry and to honor ourselves. And so I really was like, okay, I don't have the exact names of my ancestors. I can't go back 6 7 generations back, and I don't know their names. I don't know exactly the cities they come from, but I do know that they were here, and I know that they were here, and because of that I am here. And so, what can I do? What do I know, right? What are the things that I do know to be fact? And what are the things that I can trace back? And how can I use all of the things, what the spirits tell me, what the plantains tell me, what my abuelita tells me? How can I use all of that to come up with something that allows me to continue and to become? And so that's really what the journey is in part two is like, what's the history of the plantain so that I can know my history as well?
And that's where part 3 takes us, which is to your becoming, to your finding peace, to knowing and reminding readers too that we are loved, because I think that was also just incredibly important and powerful as well. I have to say, this was one of the most accessible poetry collections I've read in a while. And I think, again, maybe it's because these stories are familiar to me. But I know for someone listening, right, it might not be as familiar, but we are giving them a window. Through this conversation, you are providing a window through this book. But folks kind of are a bit stuck up about poetry. They feel like, no, what is this? It's not accessible. I don't understand. What am I doing? Tell
Yeah.
listeners 3 things they can do to, one, just read and appreciate poetry for what it is, because I think poetry is life, and how they can read and receive your collection along with the collections of many other poets out there.
I will say, for me, poetry is accessible. And I was very careful with the language to make sure that this was something that folks can read to their kids, folks can read to family members, all walks of life. You can read to your friends, and it's easy reading. It can be, some of the poems are a little complex. Sorry, that's my toddler in the background. Some of the poems are complex, but I really tried to make it accessible. I wanted for folks to journey through the poems and not feel weighed down by complicated, language, and even the metaphors. I think I used some metaphors that are heavier than others, but I think I really stuck with really honoring the story of the plantains and our story as well. And so I will say to folks that reading poetry is something to do when you want to feel. And it's also something to do when you're short on time, because poems are short. So, for example, you can read part one of the collection within 30 minutes. You're done with part one. So I think it's important to just explore poetry and have fun with it. I think some folks think of poetry as a super complex thing, and it can be, it can be. But I think it's also important to explore poetry because poetry is at least what writers like me hope to make it is honoring our stories in making it beautiful in really short short pages, because a poem is maybe 2 to 3 pages, 1 page. So it's just like you're exploring so much, and you're giving something profound meaning, and you're letting folks sit with all of the feelings in the words and in the stories, and then you're letting them go about their day, just like something maybe the poem is like in your head and it's ruminating, and you're just like, as you're going about your day, you're like, I get it now. I see that metaphor. I see this line, or this line stuck out to me, or I really love how the writer did this and this and this and made this phrase pop out, or I love the profound meaning of this. It's just going to make you feel something. So if you want to feel, because a lot of folks want to just read and be numb to things, and I think that poetry makes you confront yourself in the mirror. It makes you really have to confront someone's humanity and your own humanity. And a lot of folks don't like to be vulnerable. And so I would say is, I think that poetry is just beautiful and it is life. I think poetry is magical, and poetry is able to resurrect so many stories and so many of people's just lived experiences and make it something just so magical. And so, yeah, I can't do any more convincing than that. So definitely read a poetry book. And I'll share on my list later of some of my favorites that you can definitely do some reading on.
Yay! I'm super excited to hear it. Can't wait to get your list of recommendations. But I'm curious now, because I agree, you read poetry when you want to feel. And I even found myself reading some of these poems to my family as well. So it's also something you can share. I'm curious though, what what was your relationship with poetry before you started writing it? Were you an avid reader of it? Like, how were you introduced to this art form? What's your backstory with the art form?
So funny enough, my cousin Maciel, when I was like 6 or 7, I spent the summer in the Dominican Republic while my mom was working all summer, and my mom sent me with my aunt to stay all summer with my grandma. And my cousin Maciel lived with my grandmother. And my cousin Maciel used to write her boyfriend little love poems about kissing under a mango tree. And that was like their little spot where they would meet up and like kiss each other. And she was like maybe 13 or 14 at the time, and she had a little boyfriend that she kept a secret, and she would write him these love poems. And that was my first introduction into poetry. And to me, I wanted to be just like my cousin Maciel. I thought she was just so beautiful. She was so powerful. She was very like confident and just like had this long flowy hair, and her skin was always glowing. She always smelled like cotton candy. She smelled delicious. I literally would like copy and try to do everything she did. She was like my superhero. And when she shared one of the poems with me where it's like this, she's like, can we kiss under the mango tree, let's meet up, and blah blah blah. And she's like saying all these beautiful things about this boyfriend, this little boyfriend she has. And I had copied the poem and I had rewrote my own version, but I still kept the name, which was like, can we kiss under the mango tree? And then I took it with me at the end of the summer, and I was like writing these poems about kissing boys under mango trees. And I had no idea what I was writing. But I had brought it to my mom. It was in my luggage, and my mom found the poems, and she was like, what are these poems? You're too little to be kissing boys under mango trees. And I was like, Mom, this was a poem I wrote. I just copied it. And she was like, no, you. And she was just like so scared. She was like, has my little daughter been kissing boys under mango trees all summer? Like, she was petrified. And so from there, I kind of was shunned because my mom was so disappointed in me. She was so upset that I was like, oh my God, poetry is so scary. Like, this can cause this reaction. And so I stopped like exploring poetry for a while. And then in middle school, but I still used to always journal. And that was kind of like I had a little secret journal when I was a kid, and I would like still write little things. And then in middle school, my humanities teacher had us we wrote these mini poetry books, and we decorated the covers and we wrote poems inside. And then my school, Tompkins Square Middle School, was across the street from the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. And we were taken on a field trip across the street to the New Eurekan Poets Cafe, and we were able to perform our poems on the stage. And to me, that was like the first, and then we also got to see some professional poets perform. And to me, that was like so like big. I was like, oh my goodness, people are like professional poets. Like, this is a big deal. And ever since then, I was kind of like obsessed with like poetry and like writing poetry, but I was still very shy. And so for most of high school, I would journal and write poetry, but I wouldn't go to open mics. I wouldn't share anything. I wouldn't do any of that. And then in college, I started really exploring. I would do open mics. I was like, I really want to be a poet, so let me explore it in my writing. And I started writing these mini collections and themed poems, and that's how I really just started in that. And then I decided to join a poetry slam team. I joined Dallas Poetry Slam, and that's kind of how I really started feeling confident in my writing and feeling like this could be an actual thing, right? And it definitely was a lifelong journey. And it's taught me so much about just believing in yourself, believing in your stories, even when you're getting like 10,000 no's and no's and no's and no's, really believing that your stories matter and that folks need to read this and they need to, digest the work. And here we are on my debut now.
Yay, here we are indeed. That's just actually a beautiful story. I loved hearing it. Thanks for sharing it with
Thank
us.
you.
Now, I'm curious to get into your reading life. So,
Yeah.
and I want to get some poetry too. So, tell us about the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
So I am obsessed with Neruda on the Park by Clavis Natera. I'm such a fan of her novel. When I first read Neruda, I read it I believe a year and a half ago when I received an advanced reader's copy, and I was still dealing with like a lots of postpartum. Like my brain was just not my brain. And so I read it and I kind of read through it, but I didn't really take it in. But then I was like, let me give it another try. And then I read it this time because there were so many books that I had just shelved because my brain, I just couldn't concentrate. I don't know what happened to me, but I was dealing with like postpartum depression. I was dealing with postpartum hormonal issues. And my brain just wasn't my brain. Also, I was like sleep deprived because my toddler was still small and he just was not sleeping as much as I wanted. So my brain was just fried. And so a lot of these books I've revisited because I was just like, I need to really read it, And so Neruda on the Park is one of those books that at first I was just like, I didn't have the brain capacity because there are also moments where like you have to ask yourself, what are you in the mood for? And so at the time, I could only read through poetry because it's shorter and I couldn't read through novels. So for almost 2 years, I had just stuck to just reading poetry. But now I'm back to reading more novels. So Neruda in the Park by Clavis Natera. My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinka, I believe it's Oyinka Braithwaite. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, Oyinka. You're the best, though. I love My Sister the Serial Killer. This is the third time I've read it. And it's just so I laugh throughout the novel, and I'm also like so scared and petrified. And I usually don't read like scary books or like any books about violence. But My Sister the Serial Killer is just so well written. I love the characters. I love the sisters. I've also been reading a lot of self help books. I've been doing a lot of therapy, and my therapist is always recommending books for me. And The Mountain Is You by Brianna Weiss is amazing. It's just helped me so much with just really building my confidence, especially because having a debut is just it's so, also really vulnerable because like that some folks are gonna love it, some folks are gonna hate it. So I really had to build up my confidence to just be okay with having my work out there in the world. So The Mountain Is You is helping me with that. In Our Shoes by Brianna Hope is one of my new books that I've read. I actually was able to be in conversation with her for her debut as well here in Dallas. And In Our Shoes is just a beautiful, also just sad, deep, personal story about Brianna's own journey as a Black woman growing up in the South and then living in New York, and now she also lives in Paris. And I love the essays, and they're just so honest. And they're also doing a lot of the work for you. So for folks who want to understand what Black women go through, she's doing a lot of the work for you, so you have no excuse to, not be aware of these issues. She talks about colorism. She talks about anti-blackness. She talks about, how, her navigating white spaces, her navigating relationships, friendships, all of these things, being criminalized, being treated as lesser than, like all of these things. Also, she talks about just in terms of health, what that means for our mental health, for our physical health, not being believed in certain aspects and things like that. And microaggressions, she definitely talks about lots of microaggressions. I love Bless a Daughter, Raised by a Voice in Her Head by Worcestershire. Super huge fan. I read those poems all the time. They just are just so good. I also love Girls That Never Die um, by Safia. And then, let's see, I think that's all I put on my list. I've got some books that I look forward to reading that I just received in the mail. So I actually was able to meet Anne Napolitano. And she was here in Dallas, and I got some tickets. Yeah, it was so good. Her, just everything, her journey from raising kids and taking some time away from her writing to then becoming a New York Times bestseller to then having Oprah, pick her book, Hello Beautiful. So I'm excited to read Hello Beautiful. I also have A Renaissance of Our Own by Rachel E. Cargle that I'm so excited to read. I love Rachel's work in terms of all the work that she does with creating more conversation around Black women's mental health and humanizing us, because I think a lot of the books that I've been interested in reading this year, it's really about humanizing all of our experiences and allowing ourselves to understand how our intersections lead us to who we are, and understand how to have empathy for each other, within our intersections and within our different, diverse identities. And I've really been craving, books that explore that, explore the fullness of our identities. I also have Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame on my list. I'm excited to read it. Um, yeah, and that's what I have so far. Oh, I'm currently reading Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. It's been so far so good. I love that the women are the Marte women, and it's my last name. So I was like, I gotta read it. But I actually did the audiobook for Elizabeth Acevedo's Clap When You Land, and we got 2 Audie scores. So kudos to us.
Yay! I love hearing this. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so on the show, we also love indie bookstores. So share with our listeners your favorite local indie.
So I love Wild Detectives. It's in Dallas. I also love Deep Ellum Books. And I go to my local half price bookstore as well, because I love a little good, little cheap deal for older books. I love thrift books as well. But yeah, those are my top. I usually for new books, I usually go to Wild Detectives because it's super cool. They have a huge backyard there where you can just read all afternoon. They always do a lot of events. And my book launch in Dallas is actually going to be there. So super exciting.
Yay, love it. So getting back to your book, getting back to your collection, Plantains and Our Becoming, what are you hoping readers might think or feel after they've turned the last page, after they've read the last poem?
I hope they feel a little bit freer. I really do. That's why the last poem is called Libre, because I really hope that folks understand what it costs to become, and then also understand how freeing it is to become, how freeing it is to be your most authentic self, to honor all that you are, to love all that you are. I mean, there's so much love in our communities, and I want folks to remember that whenever it gets tough, whenever you're having bad days, to just remember that love for self, love for community, love for your ancestors, and so truly honor it and truly go forth and maneuver the world, understanding that we are blessed and we are highly favored and we are loved.
Yes, yes, indeed. Blessed, highly favored, and loved. Melania, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Oh, what a joy. I don't want the conversation to end. It's so good.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.